Dobry den Nederland, Dobry den en basketballiefhebbers, goedendag hier vanuit Praag. Vandaag de laatste dag van EuroBasket, wedstrijd van Nederland tegen Finland. Daarover maken wij na de wedstrijd weer een mooie show. Dat zal zijn donderdag, einde van de middag of donderdagavond. Al naar gelang hoe lang wij in de arena kunnen werken. Maar als alternatief soort preview, als gevoel van Europese basketbalpassie hebben wij vanmorgen ook een uitzending. En die is met Josh Halickman. En hij heeft het platform The Sports Rabbi opgericht. Hij is hier met een hele ploeg, zijn hele familie werkt eraan mee. Hij gaat het straks allemaal uitleggen. Hij volgt niet alleen het Israëlische basketbal, dat natuurlijk flink in de lift zit nu met Deni Avdija, de ster van de Washington Wizards, met wie wij eerder spraken. Maar hij volgt ook allerlei andere teams. Hij weet veel van Europees basketbal. Hij kent Arik Sivek, die momenteel in Nederland werkt. En die natuurlijk ook kampioen werd, onder andere met Amsterdam. Dus het is niet iemand die alleen maar naar zijn eigen team kijkt, maar ook echt op persconferenties heel actief is om mee te denken, vragen te stellen aan de andere coaches van de andere landen. Dus absoluut een boeiend interview. Dat Sports Rabbi, dat ziet u hier achter mij, dat is dan de website. Ze hebben ook een app, ook in het Engels. En ze zijn onder andere ook heel actief op Instagram. Sports Rabbi even opzoeken en dan is al het basketbalnieuws te volgen. Basketbal natuurlijk echt een grote sport in Israël. Hier komt ons interview met Josh Halickman.
We are here with Josh Halickman from the sports platform, the Sports Rabbi. Josh, thank you so much for taking the time. First of all, can you explain to the Dutch audience what is the Sports Rabbi?
Sure. So Sports Rabbi, sportsrabbi.com was founded more than a decade ago. It's two websites right now. There's an English website which covers all Israeli sports, trying to bring the love of Israel through sports. So it's more of a public platform. And of course, because I love basketball, that's primarily a lot what I cover on there. But it's also bringing stories about Jewish athletes. It's also about stories of the Israeli teams and Israeli sports. So we try to get as much as we can on there. The Hebrew side of the website is just basketball. And there I actually have a full staff of people working. And we're probably the third largest basketball website in Israel right now. So we're very large on that aspect. We have a number of employees and a number of writers, and you can always Google Translate, but there we have podcasts also. We have podcasts in English as well, but we have tons and tons of just basketball content, primarily about the Israeli League and the Israeli national team. Anything about basketball in Israel in Hebrew is on the website. So,
Josh, maybe
cool.
what many people don't know, in the early days of basketball, it was quite for a large part a Jewish sport. There were a lot of entrepreneurs, Abe Saperstein, those guys. They were really, breaking the way for basketball to become big internationally, but also in the States. So there's a really nice link there with the Israeli community, Israeli culture.
Sure, definitely. I mean, Abe Saperstein you bring up as somebody that was one of the founders of basketball in the 40s and 50s, Philadelphia, New York. The college scene was primarily all Jewish players, which is really City College in New York City. And I got to live in New York for a number of years. Originally, I'm from Montreal, Canada. Lived in New York for a little over a decade before moving to Israel 18 years ago. So definitely there's a lot of big roots in the Jewish basketball scene. However, over the last 30, 40, 50 years, it's very rare that you have a great Jewish star. Right now, we're lucky we have Deni Avdija in the NBA. Right before that was Omri Caspi, the first player in the NBA, first Israeli in the NBA, which was great. So you can definitely see this growing interest, not only for Israelis in Israel, but Jews worldwide, because they want to keep seeing how Deni Avdija is going to do, and, is he going to match Omri Caspi? Is he going to be better? How are the Washington Wizards doing? So it brings this whole new nuances to the sport of basketball.
Let's not forget the Israeli greats like Berkovic, like Yamshi. There have been a few, right?
Definitely a lot of great players. A lot of those players would have probably loved to have gone to the NBA had they had the opportunity. Mickey Berkovic actually had an opportunity in the 70s, but Maccabi Tel Aviv would not let him out of his contract to go to a training camp with the Atlanta Hawks, actually. So he could have gone to the NBA. That didn't happen. But those guys are all around still. I mean, Doron Jamshi still works for Maccabi Tel Aviv. He does a lot of their public relations things with the general, foundation type work, which is great. Mickey Berkovic is always at the games, and Tal Brody, of course, originally an American who's lived in Israel ever since, always at the games. So you see the links of history anytime you go to the arena Yad Eliyahu in Tel Aviv, which is great.
And amazing coaches as well, and amazing presidents. We can talk for hours about those days. Josh, before talking more about the Israeli national team that's doing so well, I saw you very active also in the international press conference, advising, asking sharp questions about other countries. What do you observe around the Dutch national team now that they have played 4 games here in Prague?
Yeah, they've done a really remarkable job. People shouldn't look at the 0-4 record and say, oh, they've been terrible. They've been really good, okay? They need a little bit extra near the end of the games. They're missing something, which is fine. That will come. But I think that everybody is really pleasantly surprised at how good Holland has been. I think that's a credit to the coach, I guess Maurizio Buscaglia, or Arik Shivik, who works in the youth department. I would assume gets some of the credit as well. I know Arik for many years. But it's been exciting to see the players really give it their all. Worthy de Jong is one of the great ambassadors of the game of basketball, and I think it's crazy that probably 99.9% of the people in the Netherlands have never heard of Worthy de Jong. A friend of mine was at a wedding in Amsterdam, I believe this weekend. He spoke to over 100 people in the wedding. Not one person knew that the EuroBasket was going on. So people in the Netherlands, and I'm talking to you right now, make sure you start following basketball because you have some really up-and-coming great players. De Vries is going to be a great talent. There's something to watch here, and this is the sport of the future. I know that there's also this sense of, urban development around basketball. Worthy and I were talking about that for a while, and that's something great. It gets people involved, and I think you're going to see more youth playing. And today you were so close. It was so close, and we, even though I should have been rooting for Poland, because it would have helped Israel out kind of. I was really like, I want Mauricio because he coached in Israel. I want Arik Shivik because he's with you guys, and I wanted to see Worthy de Jong really try to lead this team to a, which would be a surprise victory. But in reality, it wouldn't have been a surprise victory because the Netherlands has played really, really solid basketball throughout this week, and it's been a pleasure to watch. It really has been.
Awesome analysis, Josh. We spoke to Arik Shivak in Amsterdam a few weeks ago. He told us about the current success of Israeli basketball, not only the senior team, but also on the youth level. He's coached there. He's groomed these players, so to say. And he told me about the philosophy that Israel tries to use. A lot of shooting, a lot of offensive rebounding. They have a talented big guy in Zuzman at this moment, but generally, the population is a bit smaller, but they use that to their advantage. Can you describe the current style of play in Israel? Of course, there's all kinds of variations, but what is the strength at this moment?
So definitely, it's a guard-heavy Israeli domestic league, which we bring in a lot of players that have played either in the NBA or the G League. So it's a fun league. It's an entertaining league. It's one that you see a lot of shooting, like you said, a lot of three-point shooting. You see a lot of driving to the basket. You see a lot of ball movement. It's not a static Eastern European style of basketball where they're moving it around. Like, you're not going to see a Serbian style of game. I mean, even though Serbia could play any style, but if you know what I'm talking about from that aspect, you see a lot of that type of play, especially in the younger ages. And you mentioned the three-point shooting. The under-18 team last year, a lot of three-point shooting. The under-16, under-18 this year, under-20 this year, a lot of three-point shooting. And we are developing bigger players, thankfully. Gilad Levy, he's 7'1", for example, played for the under-20 with Noam Dovrat, who's a rising star as well. He's a point guard, and they worked magic. Both of them should have been on the tournament team, but they picked one, which was Dovrat. Gilad Levy was tremendous. Even in this tournament, we have some big players. Roman Sorkin is a big player. So you're starting to see some of the size rubbing off, but yes, three-point shooting is big. We haven't seen very good shooting in this tournament from Israel so far. I think some of the shooters haven't really gotten into the groove, but we'll see how it goes forward. But it's, again, Israel has a very exciting youth system. It's growing, and I think that's great for the game. And I think, again, it really comes down to Omri Caspi and Danny Avdia. And why do I say that? Because when a country has an NBA player, the children, the youth have a role model to look up to. And that is what I believe the Netherlands desperately needs. Now, I know you had in Rick Smits, but there was no internet back in the days of Rick Smits. There was no social media in the days of Rick Smits. You need guys that are out there, that people can admire, that are good role models, that can do solid work for the people of the Netherlands to drive the sport. Even if you had a top-level EuroLeague player, it would be extremely helpful. And I think that is the little thing that was missing in those games that we saw this week. You would have had a little bit more of that experience from a EuroLeague player that could take over. Maybe you would have been even 2-2 at this point.
Israel has done well here. They've beaten Holland. They're fully in the running to advance to Berlin. How do you see them progressing in the rest of this EuroBasket?
Well, yesterday, all the media, before the Poland game, were already starting to book their tickets to get to Berlin. Then after the Poland game, everybody stopped immediately. Well, hold on a minute. Let's take a deep breath over here. Today we have Serbia. Israel needs a miracle to defeat Serbia. It will be interesting to see Deni Avdija play against Serbia. Of course, his father was a Serbian legend for Red Star Belgrade. So he has a personal derby, which is going to be fun. And we're all excited to see how they're going to match up against them. Could Israel surprise them? Anything could happen, right? But after we saw when Serbia decides to turn on the Jets, like they did yesterday against Finland, they came in ready to play. We saw what happened to Finland. It could have been easily 50 points. It was only 30. So Israel to defeat Serbia is a very tall task. It's going to probably come down to the Czech game tomorrow. Whoever is going to win that game will go up. And I have my very big doubts playing against the host country at 5:30. You're going to have a packed gym of probably 18,000 people supporting the Czech Republic. Satoransky, I would expect to play. I don't know how effective he'll be. And I think Israel's in a lot of trouble. I think even though they're 2-1 right now, they're in a lot of trouble. But who knows? You know, anything can happen. If the Czech Republic somehow defeats Finland, then Israel's already in to the next round. I doubt that will happen. I think Finland's going to put the smack down on the Czech Republic coming up. But we'll have to see how things go.
Josh, like we talked about before, you and me, that's what's exciting about EuroBasket. It's very close, it's very competitive. A huge chunk of very good nations that are, you know, really battling it out right now. Many thanks again for your time, and please tell our viewers again, they can use Google Translate, where they can find your platform.
All right, it's sportsrabbi.com, sportsrabbi.com. It will lead you to a Hebrew website. There's also a tab in big, it says English. You click the English, read the stuff in English. There's all kinds of analysis and podcasts. If you want to try the Hebrew out, put it through Google Translate. You can check me out at The Sports Rabbi, at The Sports Rabbi, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, sportsrabbi.com. We just released an app in celebration of the EuroBasket. We released it literally as the EuroBasket days, right a few days before. You can download the app as well and get all your notifications right to your telephone.
Awesome, Josh. That's why this man is working 24/7 at EuroBasket, pumping out great content, taking the time with us. Thank you so much, Josh Halickman.
Ja, dat was dus Josh Halickman van de Sports Rabbi. We hadden een passie voor zijn basketbal. En mooi dat hij ook vertelde over de geschiedenis, de pioniers in het basketbal, de roots in Philadelphia, New York, de jaren 80 met Yamshi en Berkovic. Heerlijk basketballand Israël. Ze hebben dus een app, ook in het Engels, actief op Instagram, website Sports Rabbi en dan /en van English en dan krijg je wat hier achter mij te zien is. Jeroen en ik die gaan weer onze zware tas inpakken. Wij gaan naar de arena samen met in ieder geval duizenden Finnen die zich de Wolfpack noemen. Dus allemaal van die t-shirts ook met een wolf erop. Dus de roedel Finse wolven straks tegen het Oranje legioen in de O2 Arena. Alles daarover in onze uitzending later op de dag. Iedereen heel veel plezier gewenst bij het kijken naar die wedstrijd Nederland-Finland. Natuurlijk weer op Ziggo en via Courtside 1891. Tot onze volgende uitzending.